Okay, go to 2 Samuel chapter 23. 2 Samuel chapter 23. And we're going to see here just a quick, let's wrap this thing up in the life of David. We're talking about the problems in the nation. Of course, we saw the problems in his family. He loses 4 of his sons. That, of course, is in the prophecy of Nathan, who said that fourfold he would suffer. And so he loses the infant son, who died at birth, and the son of Bathsheba. Then he also loses Amnon. How does Amnon die? Absalom kills him. And then he loses Absalom. And we know how Absalom died, hanging from his hair. No. Hanging by his head or his neck in a tree. And then he also loses Adonijah, another son who tried to take the kingdom. And of all things, Benaiah, we'll see that soon when Solomon is consolidating his power. Benaiah falls on him and kills him. So, that's right. We always see Benaiah falling on people. And every time he fell, somebody died. So, that's the interpretation I get from it anyway. Anyway, so those 4 sons died as a result of David's sin. Those are the problems in the family. And then the problems in the nation, we see his son Absalom trying to steal the kingdom. And some things that, of course, a lot of things that go on with that. We see also Sheba revolting and causing trouble there. Joab kills him. Amasa, Amasa was the general of Absalom who came over to David's side. And Joab kills him in that same time period. And then Sheba's head is thrown over the wall. A wise woman. Then we also mentioned that there was a famine in the land. And so they wanted to remedy the famine. How did they remedy the famine?
The sons of Saul.
The 7 sons of Saul, family of Saul, that were hanged before the Lord. And of course, 5 of those sons came from David's first wife. It wasn't his sons, but it would have been her and her new husband. It was their sons. So David kills 5 of those. And don't kid yourself that was for a reason. I mean, that was done with a purpose. It wasn't just, oh, we need 7 people. Sorry, it happens to be your sons. I'm sure there was a little bit of vengeance here. Okay, yes?
So do you think when he was going back and forth with the Gibeonites that he said, how about if we just kill 7 sons of Saul? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good.
You're right. In his negotiations, he realized what he could do. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that was the original plan of God, the will of God. But anyway, now, along with those problems of the nation, there's one more that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the sinful pride in numbering the people. We find that in 2 Samuel chapter 24. I'll come back to chapter 23, actually, but in 2 Samuel chapter 24, David, in pride, gets this idea to number the people. It's funny that there's a book of the Bible called Numbers. And the reason that it's called Numbers is because twice in the book, the beginning and at the end, we see Moses numbering the people. Okay, he numbered them. That's why it's called Numbers. So why does David get judged for it and Moses is commanded to do it? Okay, Jared?
Well, verse 1, the Bible says, "And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David to do it." So it seems like maybe Israel sinned and God wanted I mean, that's always something I always wondered. It looks like God wanted to judge Israel because they were sinning, and he used this.
Sure.
It doesn't really make sense, but it says he moved David. No number.
In 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1, gives us a little of the other side of the picture. And Satan, this is the same story, history of David. Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. So here we see that it's Satan provoking David. So David, I believe, well, anyway, anybody else have another comment on that? Jonathan?
Well, it's just like with the story of Job. Satan was wanting to do it, but since Israel was sinning, God lifted that protection from, David's heart, and so Satan came in and influenced him.
Good point. So, yes, it was the Lord. There's something, there's obviously things going on. David is far, far, far from perfect. And the nation of Israel is far from perfect. So there's definitely sin going on. And then you've got, I think it's a good way to put it, that protection was lifted. And Satan is the one who did it, even though God allowed him to do it. Okay, so in 2 Samuel, I think the Lord allows Satan to do this. In 1 Chronicles 21, we see Satan doing it. Okay? So, David goes out, goes and tells Joab to number Israel and Judah. Verse 2, the purpose was that I may know the number of the people. I like it that Joab speaks up. By the way, Joab probably has many years ago lost a good bit of respect for David. And Joab said unto the king, now the Lord thy God add unto the people how many soever they be, 100-fold, and that the eyes of my lord the king may see it. But why doth my lord the king delight in this thing? Notwithstanding, the king's word prevailed against Joab. Now, Joab had the right idea here, no question. What's really happened, this isn't just a numbering of the army. This is David wanting to see how much they've grown, wanting to see how much they can conquer through the growth of their army. So, because we see that in Joab's response. How many soever they be, 100-fold. The Lord add unto thy people. That's the point. How many the Lord adds unto the people, that's God's business, not ours. So this is clearly a pride thing. He was lifted up and he was wanting to see how much he could accomplish and how much he had accomplished in growing the army. Okay, so this is a great sin of David, and of course they come back with the numbers. 500,000 in Judah, 800,000 in the rest of Israel. Okay, we'll make a point of this later on. I really before that you see here already, 40 years before Solomon comes on the throne, or more than 40 years, before Solomon dies and the kingdom is split. 40 years before that, all right, we see them counting separately. Okay? I don't know what you think about this, but to me this is kind of like a husband and wife having separate bank accounts. Okay, no, they might still be husband and wife, but that is not the step in the right direction. Okay? So, anyway, 500,000, 800,000, and Joab advises against it. Well, they come back, and of course, God promises them punishment for it. So, what's going to happen? Verse 12 here, Gad the seer. Y'all remember about Gad. Some of you didn't remember about Gad, that he was a prophet. So, hopefully you put that down. I know some of you did not. So here comes Gad, and he tells David, this is what's going to happen. Verse 13. Shall 7 years of famine come unto thee in thy land? 7 years of famine. Now, what would 7 years of famine do to a land? I like to think of each one of these. Which one would you choose? They're all very, very difficult. 7 years of famine would destroy the land. Okay? It would put you many years behind, put you many years back. People would die. Lots of people would die, especially if it started immediately where you're not able to plan for it. Yes?
It would, even if they could import stuff, it would wreck the economy because they would have to spend all this money.
Spend money to get it. Yep. Okay, so that would really be destructive. Or wilt thou flee 3 months before thine enemies? Your soldiers fleeing in battle. Now, David had done that before. Okay, then when he was fleeing Absalom. So he could have taken this option, but thousands of... and fleeing, it doesn't just mean fleeing, it means losing. Losing. So you're going to have a lot of your soldiers killed. Or would you take 3 days of pestilence? And David basically says, I don't know which one to pick. So the Lord sent a pestilence, verse 15, upon Israel from the morning even to the time appointed. That's 3 days. And there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. Okay, so the pestilence destroyed 70,000. Yes?
I was just noticing, like these three judgments, like 2 of them are against the nation of Israel, and 1 of them is against David personally, where he'd be running for 3 months. And David chooses the one against the nation instead of against himself.
See, I don't really think the fleeing before his enemies is not necessarily just himself, I don't believe. Now, if you think Absalom would be the only, that type of a situation where it's his own family, then I guess it would be him. But, I mean, his enemies is a lot more than just local.
This is all like here in 14, it says, let me not fall into the hand of a man. And, before that said, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But he was moved to pick a punishment for all the people, though. Because even though he sinned, but ultimately it was God's judgment upon all of Israel.
Mm-hmm. So you're...
I just think it was interesting to know.
So are you knocking David for that?
No, it was just interesting to know.
Huh, yeah, that's a good point. All right, so anyway, David chooses he chooses to fall into the hand of the Lord, whatever he wills. And God sends this pestilence. Which one would you choose? I've often thought about this. Yes?
I would have gone for the 3 days of pestilence.
Why?
Because you're going to have death either way, and the amount of death would be equal, so why not get it over with in the shortest amount of time?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly what I say. When I was a little kid, you're getting spankings. Who wants to put that off? Right? So, you get in trouble, you don't want it to keep on having that hang over your head. My son got his 10th worm yesterday. And so, for a couple days, he's been right on the edge, and the teacher said he's just been miserable, trying to be very careful. And she said she was glad that he got his 10th worm because it relieves that pressure. So, okay, yeah. All right, yes?
Now, what does it mean by pestilence? I'm not sure.
Okay, good question. Let's talk about that.
Natural disaster or something?
Any ideas? Pestilence. What's a pestilence? Okay, yes? A plague? What's a plague?
Bubonic plague or something.
Okay,
Yeah.
some major sickness, something along those lines, almost certainly. If you look back in the days of the 10 plagues of Egypt, where thousands of people died at each one of those, I believe, at least at many of them.
Right.
Okay, well, let's talk about the frogs. People would say, well, that's just irritating. No. Yes, when they're alive, it's irritating. But when you have big piles of dead frogs, the Bible says the land stank. I like that word. It stank. But that's not the only thing that dead frogs do. What do? They carry disease. After a while, it brings dead, rotting flesh there, brings disease. Okay? I think specifically of cholera. Where, I know it's typically with mice and rats and stuff, but dead animals can bring these kinds of things. So, it was something along those lines, I believe, that was spread very rapidly, the swine flu.
In which case, I would have to agree with Josh. It'd probably be better to go with the pestilence because, like saying flee from your enemies, it would have wrecked a lot of, not just the people, but also all the cities and everything.
Sure, infrastructure.
The famine would have wrecked the agriculture.
Yeah.
If it wasn't wrecked.
And your economy.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree. I would always take the 3 days over the 3 months or the 7 years. Oh, man. Let's get this thing done with. Bend over, grab my ankles, and take the whooping, it's time to get it over with.
In this case, you die.
So, anyway, so the Lord sends this judgment. Okay, so let's then lastly concerning this, David repents and offers a great sacrifice. Look at verse 16. When the angel stretched out his hand upon Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord repented him of the evil and said to the angel that destroyed the people, "It is enough, stay now thine hand." And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing place of Araunah the Jebusite. Now I've often wondered, I don't have an answer, what did this look, was this actually, they could see the hand of the Lord or the angel of the Lord standing over Jerusalem reaping with a sickle? What is this? Did the angel of the Lord was by the threshing, it was at an actual place, so it was an actual object. It's not a spirit, I don't believe. So it's something, the hand of the Lord was there at Araunah the Jebusite. Yes?
Yeah, it says, or 17 says, and David spake unto the Lord when he saw the angel that smote the people.
He said, "Lo, I have sinned." Yep. So he buys this threshing floor from Araunah the Jebusite. By the way, the Jebusite, this is a Canaanite who is still left over from the old Jebusite days of having a fort there on Mount Zion. David had, of course, conquered that fort, but there were other Jebusites living around that probably had joined in, become, you want to call it, proselytized. They had become a part of Israel. Okay, so he buys this threshing floor, and of course he offers a sacrifice there unto the Lord, and the Lord stayed the pestilence from Jerusalem. Okay, let's move on then beyond that. We also want to point out, I'm going to go back to chapter 23 for this. I want to point out some of David's mighty men. And again, we could take a long time with each one of these. But let me just point out a few of these that I think are pretty significant. David had 30 mighty men. And you can add this as a part of his, I don't know. I have it under the problems in the nation because it's included in this list of things. But really this would be a section on his army and the type of soldiers that he had fighting for him. If you go down to chapter 23, verse 8. These be the names of the mighty men whom David had. Okay, so he had 30 mighty men. Of the 30, he had a first group and a second group. Verses 8 through 17 list out some of the things that the first group did. And then verse 18 through 23, some of the things that the second group did. And I don't think this is in any way splitting them up according to ability. Okay? They all had ability. This is splitting them up for strategic reasons. By the way, somebody put down on their test that Benaiah was the head of the Jebusites and something else. I got a good kick out of that. That was Josh. That was real funny. It's the Cherethites and the Pelethites. But you had your ites, right? Yeah. I don't even think, did I mark you off for that? I don't even think I marked you off for that. I just wrote it in there. Gave me a good laugh. The Jebusites. So, appreciate that. All right, so let me mention a couple things here in the first group. Jashubim. This is just a few that I wanted to mention. Verse, my goodness, I can't find it. I wrote down here what I wanted to say about him, but I didn't write the verse down. What am I looking for? I don't even see the one I had here. Okay. You know what? This would be in 1 Chronicles. That's where it is. 1 Chronicles chapter 20. 1 Chronicles chapter 20. I believe it's in 1 Chronicles 20. Let me see here. Verse 4 through 8. Okay. Oh, well. Yeah, that's a different one. Wow, anyway, I don't know where I got these from. Okay, anyway, I have the numbers, but I don't have the same name, and I'm guessing that I got that name from somewhere else who must be the same person's name. Anyway, Jashubim, in this passage, verse 8, it calls him Adino, A-D-I-N-O. Anyway, he lifted up his spear against 800 whom he slew at one time. 800. Okay, I don't believe that this means he had 800 people surrounding him, all jabbing at him, and he killed all of them. Okay? I believe that that means he had them coming at him, and he's killing 800 people before he stops. Okay, now we'll never hopefully practice this, and where you'll get to see how tired you are after killing 100. But just imagine swinging a heavy sword and with skill and dexterity for a long, long time, killing 100 and then another 100, back and forth. It's a show of his strength. It's a show of his skill and fending off people and killing at the same time. 800. Okay, we'll never experience this, I hope. I'd go out on a branch to say that you never will. Out on a limb. Eleazar is another one. Verse 9, Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the three mighty men with David. Now, what does he do? He smote the Philistines until his hand was weary and his hand clave unto the sword. His hand was locked up around that sword handle, and he couldn't let go. The Lord wrought a great victory. Shammah, the son of Agi, the Hararite. There's a story here of a ground of lentils, a bean field. And he defended it. He stood in the midst of the ground, verse 12, and slew the Philistines. A great victory here. By the way, Jonathan, think of Jonathan fighting the Philistines. He did about the same thing, him and his armor bearer. Yes?
Sorry, could you say that name? I was sort of near it.
Which one? Shammah?
The one you just said, yeah,
Shammah.
Shammah.
Find that in verse number 11 of 2 Samuel chapter 23. All right, then the second group. Abishai, David's nephew. In one battle, he killed 300. 300. He's not even halfway to the guy who killed the 800. And then Benaiah. Oh yes, Benaiah. The one who fell on people and they died. He killed 2 of Moab's mightiest warriors. Verse 20 says he killed 2 lion-like men of Moab. And he killed a lion in a pit. So this guy had an affinity for lions. He killed 2 men that were like lions, and then he killed a lion. Killed the 2 lion-like men, so that wasn't enough. Let me go find a real lion. Lion-like men. Yes?
It just seems that this is like a different class of people back
Yes,
then than what we
yes,
have
yes.
today.
Goliath.
Well, I mean, even with all
Giants.
the battles, the gene pool.
Oh,
strong.
yeah.
If you're killing anyone that died in battle, even if you're strong, it's like, you know, you're whittling down the weaklings, and you have this pure race of warriors.
Okay. I don't know about that, but a different breed of, yes, I agree. I mean, these guys, they think different. They thought different. It was an honor, a glory to, for hand-to-hand combat. And in our day, that's like, almost unheard of anymore in the military.
I like it, like with my the crossbow I have, it's 150 pounds. But I've heard longbows back 500 years ago, 180 pounds. You have to pull it like that. 180 pounds. Do that a lot.
Wow.
Not just 10 shots.
Right. Okay, so strong men, lion-like men. And I just think, and I believe this is, that they were strong, very strong men, and that they would have had, the look of a lion. I really believe that. Big beards, hairy, okay? They looked like a beast coming at these men, or at this man, and he killed both of them. Okay? He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit. And I can't think of anything more scary, more deadly than that. Yes?
I was just wondering, whenever I read like why, do you think there was a purpose, or do you think
There must have been a purpose.
like you read some of these acts,
Right.
It seems like, oh, let's just go through.
Let's go do something for fun today.
Do you think these guys are that like that? Oh, there's a lion. Let's kill this lion. Or
Seems like he was being held as a prisoner in a pit.
There's some purpose, and I don't know what it is, but I do think that they just relished
that's what I'm saying.
the chance to do something like this.
Yeah.
That there was supreme confidence, where we would, with great intimidation and fear and trembling, and they obviously were not like that. Not at all. Yes?
I was just thinking about the story of Daniel, right after they took Daniel out and they threw
Yes.
that guy's families in there. They were already dead. The lions had already snatched them before they even hit the bottom of the
They never
pit.
hit the bottom of the pit. So, yeah, good point. That's very good. All right, he also killed an Egyptian. The Bible tells us. We don't know how big this guy was or whatever, but he was obviously some kind of a warrior. And the Egyptian had a spear in his hand. And this guy, Benaiah, had only a staff, a stick. So he knew how to fight with a stick. Okay, now that's an art. What's that called? I don't even know the name, technical name of it. But there's an art of martial arts called, it has to do with stick fighting. You don't have to look it up now. But stick fighting. And he took the guy's spear away from him and killed him with his own spear.
Nunchucks.
Yes. All right, so Benaiah. This is a great fighting man. We don't know when these things happened. These are just stories of how these men were and what kind of feats they accomplished. It didn't happen in this, in this time period right before the number of the people or anything like that. But those are some of the things that these great men did. All right, and then lastly, let's wrap this up concerning David. This is my last main point concerning David. David prepared for the building of the temple. He prepared for the building of the temple. So you can put this out on one of your main points. I have this parallel to his troubles, where he had all the trouble in the family, trouble in the nation. So as far as the preparation for the temple, David wanted to build a temple unto the Lord. He had already built some dwelling place for the Ark of the Covenant, but we don't know exactly where that was, what it was. Was it a tabernacle? Anyway, but David had this idea of building a temple for the Lord. Turn over to 1 Chronicles chapter 22 to look at this passage about David. Of course, when he wanted to build the temple, the Lord at first said yes and then said no. Okay? So David didn't sit there and gripe and complain about it. He just said, well, if I can't build it, I'm going to do everything but build it. I'm going to start gathering materials for it. I'm going to start gathering or setting up the organization for it. I'm going to get everything in place so that when my son comes along, he can build this temple. He already knew that his son was going to build it. God said, I'm not going to let you build it. Your son's going to do it. So David said, oh, that's great. Make some main points here. First, he collected for the temple. Chapter 22. He collected for the temple. The entire chapter talks about things that he collected. I say entire, towards the end especially. Verse 14. I had prepared for the house of the Lord 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000, that's 1,000,000, talents of gold, of silver, and of brass and iron without weight, for it is in abundance. Timber also and stone have I prepared, and thou mayest add thereto. Moreover, workmen, and on and on and on. He prepared by collecting for the temple. Okay? I don't know how much this is, because at different times in Israel's history, talents were worth more than others. Okay? You get to the New Testament and a talent is very, very valuable. I don't think they were quite as valuable, even though obviously gold always is valuable. Gold and silver. So he collected things, building materials for the temple. Now we know from later on that the temple was built on Mount Moriah without any hammers, any chisels, without the sound of a hammer. Everything was put together somewhere else, and I believe completely built, and then all the pieces taken apart, marked probably, and then brought to the temple site and put back together. And I believe that David did that. He had everything in place already, work-wise, and not everything. He had a lot of things in place already for the building of that temple. So he collected. He also organized the personnel for the temple. He organized the personnel. Let me mention to you 4 groups of personnel that he got in preparation for this temple. In chapter 23, we see him organizing these. The first thing he did is he organized the Levites. The Levites. What did the Levites do? Let me just mention to you some of the things. There's, of course, the 3 families of the Levites, the Gershonites, the Kohathites, and the Merarites, and the Jebusites. Right, Josh? What did they do? They were musicians. They were gatekeepers. Remember the passage in the Psalm? I'd rather be a gatekeeper, a gate watcher in the house of the Lord. What is that? A Levite. So that's the job of the Levite, serving in the temple. They didn't offer the sacrifices. The family of Aaron did that. But the Levites, gatekeepers, treasurers, administrators, David organizes all of these things for the temple that would be taking place. And you can read about, especially towards the end of 1 Chronicles chapter 23, we see what some of these things that they would do. Standing every morning to thank and praise the Lord, and likewise at even. Okay, they're keeping the charge of the tabernacle of the temple. So the Levites, secondly, the priests. The priests, David organized the priests. Chapter 24. Now these are the divisions of the sons of Aaron. Nadab and Abihu, who died for offering strange fire. Eleazar and Ithamar executed the priest's office. So, Zadok, remember that Zadok, that name, the priest? Of the sons of Eleazar. Ahimelech of the sons of Ithamar. Ahimelech died. Ahimelech? Yes, Ahimelech. That's Abiathar. No, Abiathar. Anyway, I'm getting my names mixed up. There's too many of them. And here I'm expecting you to keep all these names apart, right? So, anyway, so the priests were organized. Aaron's descendants were put in charge at the temple. Then he also, in chapter 27 of 1 Chronicles, he organized the military. He organized the military to keep the peace. He actually had a draft in place. Every young person served in the military. By the way, Israel still does that. They have a draft. 2 years that every young person has to give to the military. And they take their young people around and give them tours of Israel to give them the excitement, give them motivation for what they're defending. So when we're going down to Hezekiah's tunnel, right in front of us, there was about 50 young recruits. And they all had their shoes and boots off and hanging over their neck by the strings and all their gear and backpacks. And they're barefoot walking through Hezekiah's tunnel. We had to wait for them for a while. Bunch of 19 and 20-year-old kids like you. All right, the military was divided up into 12 divisions, each with 24,000 troops and commanders, and each division had to serve 1 month of active duty per year. 1 month of active duty, so 12 divisions. So, obviously they didn't pay them like we would pay our military today. They didn't have careers necessarily. So you served for a year. You had some things provided for you, then you went back home and you farmed so you could feed your family. So 12 divisions serving 1 month per year. He also organized in chapter 27, the fourth group, I want you to note down, the officials for the administration. Chapter 27, the officials. All right, so David's an old man, and he's organized these things in preparation for his son who's going to come on the scene next. Okay, that brings us then to the end of what we're going to discuss from David's perspective. We're going to move next to Solomon, and then we'll see, looking back, or we'll look from Solomon at David's final days and the transition of the kingdom from David unto Solomon. All right, we will stop there for today. For today. For today. For today. For today.